All right, guys. It is Sunday. It is raining, and as per usual, that reminds me of comic book days when I was a kid and stuff, right? And I don't think this video is going to be what a lot of people expect, so I got to be very careful when I title this, right? But we're going back to a few questions I got thrown at me a few years ago that kind of popped in my head, and this is basically because I've been reading every article I can get a hold of about the Doom Patrol popping up on this new Titans TV show that's coming up, right? So yeah, I'm a little bit excited about it. But years ago, I would mention about being a Doom Patrol fan. I showed some stuff. I've got a long box beside of me of Grant Morrison stuff and Doom Patrol stuff right here, the box of Doom, if you will, right? And one of the questions I used to get asked was like, if you're such a fan, how come you don't talk about it? You talk about Kirby and you do All-Star Squadron and all this stuff like that. That's because there's not a spectacular story behind it. And actually digging through some of this stuff today, now that I'm feeling better, I haven't really wanted to be on camera a whole lot, because if you go back to my video where I did the haul from the Charlotte Mini-Con and stuff, I said I was tired and stuff in it. I was getting strep and the flu, and I'm getting over it. And today's the first day I really feel like I got a little bounce in me. And so I've been slowly kind of digging through some of this stuff, and my timeline in my head for this stuff is just gone. I've always talked about how 90% of this stuff can trigger a memory, and I can remember what was going on around me and with the book and stuff. And it actually is kind of serendipitous that the book of trauma and isolation and being a weirdo and a sidekick and the weird things that come around with the Doom Patrol, it actually kind of fits that I can't really plug this into a timeline, So basically, we'll go into like the way I found Doom Patrol. It actually was at a yard sale, right? But I thought I was like about 7 years old, right? I thought I was like this little, and it turns out I was probably more around closer to 9 and 10, which blows my mind. I'm not joking, and you'll see why. So I'm going through all this stuff, right? And, no big deal. I'm switching comics into short boxes. I'm up to like 28 short boxes, and I've emptied up 5 long boxes and a few other things. The shell, that's why you see the shells being messed with, right? But the first thing is that I found the Doom Patrol through a yard sale. Now, it was cool to find this. This is the original. I think you're going to get why it seems like I've been reading Doom Patrol, I thought, since about 1980. Well, this is a little DC special Blue Ribbon digest and stuff, and it reprinted a bunch of the 60s stuff of the Doom Patrol, right? And when I found this, I automatically saw this and realized it was DC, and it has a George Perez cover. I recognize the art and stuff, and it's got a few little pinups in here by, George Perez and stuff, right? But you can see that it's falling apart. I read the crap out of this, right? And I can actually take this out. Well, no, I don't know what page it goes on, right? But it had like, George Perez adding a few things in there. It had this fantastic, little back, talking about it and stuff. So I grabbed this thing at a yard sale, right? And I'd grown up on the Super Friends, and I'd read some Justice League and Legion and stuff, and then all of a sudden, here's this other corner. This is what I've loved about DC. Even though they didn't jump on and have the continuity of Marvel, you can always find like this little corner of DC where they have their own heroes, and they have these villains you never heard of and stuff, and they didn't really go out of the book. Years later, I'd find out it was because of editors. Each editor had like a little umbrella of work that they did and stuff. That's, a problem, story-wise, if you wanted continuity and stuff, right? So I read this thing, I'm reading it, right? And I'm just like, this is cool. And then, like I said, it felt like I got this so long ago and stuff, right? But the year before this Teen Titans to come out, number 13, there was a guy named Mike Kessner, and I had moved up to a place called Jewel Ridge, and we had traded some comics, and I got Justice League, something like 195 and 196 or something like that, and this from him in a trade. One of these is the original, one is the upgrade, right? And it's Teen Titans, bringing in the Doom Patrol. But this was before this came out. This is what's messed me up my timeline, so I'm being very careful, right? And it was because of these two. It was like serendipitous. I just read this thing, and then here I am getting this book, right, in a trade and stuff. And they're both the George Perez art, by the way, right? And I'm hooked. I'm hooked on the Doom Patrol. And it would be years before I got part 2 and 3 to see what was going on, because X-Men, Frank Miller, Daredevil, anything, whenever I could get to town, felt like, you know, we were on top of a coal mine in town for a while, and then I moved down into town again, miles away in a little place called Richlands and stuff. Uh, they weren't on the stands and stuff. You could find back issues of Action Comics and all this stuff still stuck in the spinner racks or in things, but when it came to like the bigger books, you can forget it, right? So it'd be years before I finished that story. Now, I would love to say that like this was going on and this was going on, but the biggest thing that really happened, these aren't the actual tapes, this is for effect, but at that same yard sale that I got this digest, I looked down and there was a shoebox full of cassettes, right? And my grandpa had a ton. He had like this room of old electronics from the 60s and 70s. He even had like this gigantic white van that he pulled in beside of the house he was renting on top of this coal mine mountain. He'd come down from Ohio, met my grandmother, married her and stuff. And he had all these like old electronics and stuff. And he had tons of these tape recorders that were like square. And they had all the buttons on the end. I wished I had a picture of them, you know. But so we had tape recorders all around. And these tape recorders had microphones. And I would record TV shows and try to get songs on it and stuff like that. So I got to listen to music. But I found all these tapes. I found a shoebox full of tapes, this Reader's Digest at a little yard sale on top of a coal mountain town, back when everybody was listening to Elvira by the Oak Ridge Boys, and it was all Johnny Paycheck and bullshit or whatever, stuff like that, this redneck country stuff. And it was really hard for me, you know, like that stuff. And in the middle of this, I find these cassettes. And the cassettes were, I call it smooth music from the 70s, and it's R&B from the 70s. It had the Meters. It had the Spinners. It had the Manhattans, Just Kiss and Say Goodbye. And I'm like, I thought I was like 7, but apparently I was like 8 or 9, maybe closer to 10 or something. And all of a sudden I'm listening to some of these cassettes while I'm reading these little comics and stuff, and I'm gone. I'm like studying this stuff, right? And then I found Percy Sledge in there. Okay, Turn a Whiter Shade of Pale, Take Time to Know Her and stuff. I'm so young that I'm used to these songs. I mean, I had songs that I played over and over and over, but it was like for good times and fun. Disco Duck, 2000 Man by Kiss, Jim Croce, Bad Bad Leroy Brown. You know, I love the Rainy Nights, Betty Rabbit and stuff like that. You know, good feeling music stuff. And this stuff is making me wanting to hug these people. You know what I mean? I'm so young and haven't really gone through anything relationship, I guess, to do it, but I didn't have the words, but it made me sad, and I wanted to hug these people, and they sounded so sad in a lot of this stuff. And then you'd have Rubber Band Man, you know, that kind of grew out of, because it was very disco-ish and stuff. And then the Percy Sledge was the one that really got me and stuff. So it was more like the same day I found the Doom Patrol, it was this whole awakening to, you know, the Cabbage Patch with the Meters and stuff like that. You know, it's like I've discovered all this music, and it was just terrible, you know, what was out there and around you that you couldn't get away from. People were singing Just a Swingin' on the back of the bus when you get on there, if you rode the bus. That's one of the reasons I started riding my bike to school and back and forth back when you could. That was a big part of it and stuff, right? So the Doom Patrol, it was like this little secret over here. You had, you know, Batman was still, you know, big, the TV shows, Super Friends and stuff. And I'm sitting here like reading and rereading this. I'm seeing Minto, and I'm like, they're going all the way with this. And I'm kind of getting interested in the Teen Titans, wanting to know more about the Doom Patrol, you know. So that's what I mean. It didn't really happen. So when you would see the Doom Patrol pop up somewhere, I think the next time I saw them was Crisis on Infinite Earths. And it was like, yes, I get to sit here and look at this. And I started liking the more obscure heroes, because Marv Wolfman would put them in actions, like Action Comics, when he was doing it with Gil Kane and stuff. So I got to see the Forgotten Heroes like Animal Man, Cave Carson, and Mortal Man. That ended up going into the Forgotten Villains and DC Comics Presents and stuff, you know, playing off that stuff. And this is probably one of the things that really, if I look back on it, it had to have something to do with the DC, because they had so many of these characters that you could pull through there and stuff, right? So then a couple years went by, and then it happened. And of course the box is backwards here, and I'm moving my camera. I just moved everything. Sorry here. So, yeah, so professional here, right? Let me swing my box around here. And, so the Doom Patrol, we get in there, and I keep getting told that these are weird. Ugh, big box. I'm still gonna upload it. I'm a one-take wonder here. Whoopsie. What? Okay, so anyway. So Doom Patrol, we go through a few years there. And this comes out like in 87 and stuff, right? There's a little special here and stuff like that. So what happens is, you know, I was a Legion fan, and I automatically recognized this art. This was Steve Lytle from the Legion. I'm like, oh my God, and it's the Doom Patrol and the Negative Woman and the Negative Man and Tempest and all this stuff. You know, I'd gotten Who's Who and stuff like that and was able to find them, and this was just fantastic, right? Right off the stands and stuff, right? And the art was fantastic. I mean, I was really into it in the mood and stuff, but Paul Kupperberg seemed to have a hold on getting to write the Doom Patrol. And to me, I already knew this was going to be a kiss of death. I was getting really nervous, like, do I do this? So I went through and I kept doing the run up until probably around issue, I think they disappeared around Invasion time. They stuck around on the stands at least for like about 14 issues around here before they disappeared. And over the years, I started finding this showcase I would pick up, the new Doom Patrol of the 70s and stuff. And, you know, it was very bland stuff, you know, part of the, you know, DC explosion, implosion. And just right away, you know, you had fans. You had like Byrne come in there and Marv Wolfman and stuff. And you get an origin with the Doom Patrol with John Byrne on it and stuff. And, you know, it was kind of cool to find this stuff that was like, it would pop up and it was a nice little surprise. And then you had this really weird book, Doom Patrol versus Suicide Squad with Erik Larsen, Paul Kupperberg, and John Ostrander. And this book it has its own little weird vibe. You know what I mean? It's like I read it and I reread it and I would sit there and I'd be like, this art is awful. But it had like this magic and this energy, and to me, it should have been like the one shot of the year, but I couldn't figure out why. It was just strange and just bizarre. And I'm like, how did this get made? How did this get put out there? But you can look at it, and I can just look at this all day long. I would end up studying it. You know, Erik Larsen did this back in the day, right? I think that's a Terry Austin Inks or something, right? And it just pulled in anything and everything that was going on. It was like ops, and they brought in villains just so you could kill them, in the Red Rockets, and it was very trying to be like political there at the end of the Cold War. You know, it was just, and I loved it. And then it happened. The buzz came out. Animal Man came out. You started hearing about this guy, Grant Morrison, and in my opinion, he was going to be, I don't know. So in my opinion, he was going to be, I'm checking it out. He was going to be Alan Moore light, so I didn't jump on it. And over the years, you started hearing about this book, right? Doom Patrol. Grant Morrison came on. And the thing about Doom Patrol with this is that I wasn't quite getting why the Doom Patrol were supposed to be weird. Arnold Drake was one of the co-creators for that. If you don't know that name, he was a co-creator of Guardians of the Galaxy with Marvel. And of course, you can get on YouTube and find the history of the Doom Patrol and stuff. I'm not going to do all that. The fact that X-Men rip off Doom Patrol, and Grant Morrison did a take where he felt like they were a rip off of the Fantastic Four or a rip on them. And I personally, when I read it as a kid, I kind of saw it like Wizard of Oz. It felt like, for some reason, every character in my mind was a Wizard of Oz. You had Elastigirl, who was Dorothy, Robot Man, who was Tin Man. You had Negative Man, who was a Scarecrow, because he would just crumple down. His whole body would just collapse if his negative energy went out. And the Chief would have been the Wizard. You know, I was a kid, man. I was a kid. But that's how I read it and stuff, right? But then Grant Morrison comes along, and I start hearing about this stuff. And then, again, my timeline is so freaking off, man. But maybe when I was about 21 or 22, the comic book shop out in Mount Empire had a bunch of dollar boxes. And I went in and I got like the first, 6 issues of Grant Morrison's run. I got it for $5. I was back the weekend after. It was a 60-minute drive back then. And as soon as I came into the shop, I walked right past Rob, the guy who owns the shop. I made a beeline hoping that the books were still there. And he went, He remembered me. He was like, I guess you like the Doom Patrol. I guess you like Morrison's Doom Patrol. And I got the rest of them and stuff, right? And this stuff, if you're going to read the Doom Patrol, it's got to be this. So I've always had this thing about the Doom Patrol, but I could never really see why they felt like they were supposed to be weird. The Doom Patrol, the reputation that they had is that they were the weird. They were just the weird and the strange and the bizarre. Yet Elastigirl was still, her power was she could shrink and grow. She was a failed actress, Rita Farr, and she's been mentioned in Doomsday Clock, by the way. And then you had, of course, Robot Man, but I've been reading All Star Squadron. Brain in a robot body. Okay, that one sucked. And you had Negative Man, who was all wrapped up and stuff, but it still didn't feel like they were anything strange and different and stuff, right? So Grant Morrison does his run on it, and oh my God, he that first, I don't know, year that he was writing that book, the things that he did and changed and shaped, and the characters he brought in, and the characters from the past, and what he did to them and stuff, that by the time they met the Justice League and they're running up, because this picture is going to eat Paris, and the Justice League is there, and you finally get to see Animal Man and Doom Patrol kind of meet if you're a Grant Morrison fan, right? They finally looked disturbing and weird, and Arnold Drake is supposed to be on record saying Grant Morrison finally did everything that he wanted to do with the Doom Patrol, with them being all weird and stuff, right? So, I could sit here and show you a whole bunch of this stuff, but maybe I'll do that later and stuff. But they take Negative Man, and you had Rebus, who became cool. And this turned into some, major weird stuff, man. Here's a good one. Okay? So it was just fantastic. And actually, there's an issue. This might be it. It's either 32 or 33 or something like that. It's a single issue story that I think is just fantastic, and it's one of my favorite stories, man. All right, guys. Oh, it's 34. So there might be a future video where I'll walk us through this issue, 34, Monsieur Mallah, the French-speaking intelligent ape in the brain, who's just a body in the brain. But anyway, that's the story, man. It's more like when I discovered Doom Patrol, it was well overshadowed by me discovering smooth music from the 70s, the Manhattans. All right, later, guys.